health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Welcome to Accelerated Health TV and radio show. I'm your host, Sarah Banta. I'm a health coach, natural supplement expert, and a busy mom of three. Make sure you hit the subscribe button below so you're notified every week with my new podcast on Mondays and Tuesdays. And if you haven't already, join my free group coaching on Telegram with the link below. I teach you on a daily basis with tips and tools to enhance your health, and you will be a part of a like-minded group to support you on your journey in addition to truly taking control of your health. The protocols and supplements I discuss are all found at sarahbantahealth.com. I am so excited about my guest today and the topic, oxalates. Oxalates. Sally K. Norton holds a nutrition degree from Cornell University and a master's degree in public health, and her path to becoming a leading expert on dietary oxalate includes a prior career working at major medical schools in medical education and public health research. But her personal healing experience inspired years of research that led to her book, Toxic Superfoods, which was released this year. Welcome, Sally. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
This is a major topic. And people are on the healthy bandwagon of juicing and kale and spinach and almonds because we're all low carb now, right? We need to eat all of these low carb healthy foods, superfoods, and they're making us sick. So first, before we get into oxalates, why don't you tell everybody your story?
I've been into nutrition for a very long time and decided as a 12-year-old that would be my career, to study nutrition and help people not get sick. And I've been sick ever since. until weirdly, I finally got forced into doing this low oxalate thing for real, for myself, when I recognized that the lifelong struggle with arthritis was actually connected to the oxalates I was eating in the Swiss chart I grew up on, and the sweet potatoes I was now making a daily staple, because it's not always just keto diets that cause us to go high oxalate. It's things like gluten-free, because quinoa, teff, buckwheat, and these pseudo grains and the arrowroot, and then the almond flour, which is everywhere now, are very high in oxalate. But I wasn't doing all that drama. I was just doing like sweet potatoes because I was now couldn't tolerate the beans and the breads and stuff. So, I mean, I had been through a lot over the years, lots of arthritis, lots of back pain, fatigue constantly. It got to the point where I needed a total hysterectomy and had to have surgery. I didn't recover from the surgery well. I couldn't go back to working. I was completely flattened and unable to do much of anything. And my doctor sent me to a sleep study. And that study showed that my brain was waking up. You know, they connect wires all over the place. And they look carefully at your movement and the brain activity. The brain was waking up 29 times an hour. 29 times an hour means you don't get any more than 2 minutes of sleep. That's not sleep. And that's probably been going on a long time because I've been really struggling with brain stuff and energy. And so I was on this hunt to solve the sleep problem. And it's a long story, but basically when I got serious about doing the low oxalate diet, I was doing it for arthritis, not for the sleep. I was doing it resentfully, thinking all my various problems were all different, separate things. And when I went on the diet, not just the arthritis went away, but the sleep problems and many other things, including 30 years of foot problems, started to disappear. And it turned out like my long list of sufferings are one toxicity syndrome. I've been poisoning myself with oxalate for a very long time.
It's just like me before we came on, I told you that you were my aha moment when I was listening to you on a podcast. And you mentioned turmeric, and here I was getting fresh squeezed delivered turmeric from organic from a farm down the road and drinking it, putting it in my drinks, my tea or my sports drink all day long, because turmeric's good for joints, right? It's good for inflammation. So more of a good thing is even better. And not to mention anything else, all the other oxalates I was eating, but all of my symptoms went away when I got rid of that. And it's the thing about oxalates, and we're going to get into it, is that it's not just like any other food allergy where you stop, like dairy, for instance, you stop it and within 2 days, the gut issues go away and your skin clears up or whatever. Oxalates take a while to get rid of out of the body, and because they're a little more difficult. But why don't we first start with what are oxalates? For those who have not listened to me at all, because I talk about oxalates all the time, what are oxalates and what is oxalic acid?
Oxalic acid oxalic acid is a natural compound made in nature. It's very easily formed. It's a very small compound made with 2 carbons and 4 oxygens. Vitamin C easily degrades into oxalate. Plants make vitamin C to make oxalate. They make oxalic acid. And then this is a chelating molecule. That means it grabs minerals. So it forms these salt compounds with minerals, loves calcium. So it's very easy for plants to build calcium oxalate crystals with the oxalate or oxalic acid that they build from vitamin C usually. And which is interesting because people love vitamin C too. This stuff, in its ability to chelate minerals, it's been very useful as a cleaner. We've been using it in industry for a very long time, since the late 1700s. It's a fabric bleach. It prepares fabrics for dyeing and sets the dye. It can remove rust from a patio and from an engine. They use it in industrial cleaning. They bleach wood with it. It's in Barkeeper's Friend and Zud. It's useful as a cleaner. And you eat too much of this cleaner and it cleans your clock out of minerals and causes some real problems with oxidative stress. And the acid, the oxalic acid, can bind with not just calcium, but most any mineral, including your magnesium and other things. And it affects your nutrient levels because it's taking calcium from your foods. It's making calcium and other minerals unabsorbable. And then it puts it in a form where you can't really use it nutritionally. And when it's the acid that gets into the bloodstream, and it can disrupt your electrolytes, including your calcium levels in your blood, stealing that, and also at the tissue level. So just its chelating effects are quite dramatic in its toxicity, just that scale alone, because we need electrolytes to run cell membranes. The keeping positive and negative charges and controlling where electrolytes are in and around cells is critical to all of the functions of life. All of the enzymes that live in the membranes of the cells and the mitochondria can be disturbed by this electrolyte disturbance. And calcium control in cells is critical for cell health. If it loses control over calcium because oxalate came along and caused too much calcium to get into the cell, or binds the calcium in the cell and makes the cell effectively calcium deficient, it really interrupts the cell's management of its own function, and the cell starts not knowing what to do.
And this is occurring throughout the body and all the organs. I mean, you when you're talking about this, it actually reminds me of when my son was depleted in electrolytes and his heart was stopping because the sodium potassium pump was out of whack. Now, was he eating oxalates at a high degree back then? No, I think his issue was he was overworking out and depleting it, but that neither here nor there.
Whatever is depleting your electrolytes is not good.
Right. And
yeah, so that's an interesting thing about that pump that moves sodium out of cells. That's really ATP dependent. That's energy dependent. And when your enzymes aren't working well and you don't have enough ATP, your ability to move the sodium breaks, and cells can be in big trouble. They'll swell up with water if sodium gets stuck in them. We see this in oxalate poisoning. You get anemia from this. It causes red cells to explode because they don't have enough ATP to control their sodium. But another thing with heart of symptoms is this, the calcium, low calcium in the blood, that it can occur when there's lots of oxalate in the bloodstream, causes arrhythmias. The pacemaker in the heart stops working properly when it doesn't have enough calcium.
So there's so many symptoms of high oxalates. Let's go through them. We're talking about the heart, and I know brain fog, the edema that you just mentioned, that was one of the big signs in me. Once I stopped the turmeric drinks, my ankles, I could see my ankles again. But there's the issues with the tissues and your genital issues. But let's go through all of the symptoms that people can look for when they're eating too many oxalates.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it shows up so differently in each person. So you have to understand the range of things that it can do and then be able to see the pattern in an individual person. And in the historical literature, it was very clear that most anyone with dietary oxalate poisoning had some form of digestive problem. And when you've got a digestive problem, it can be motility, loss of control of, say, the sphincter muscle. So you might get acid reflux, or difficulty swallowing because you've lost proper peristalsis in the swallowing mechanism. You can have a low or high stomach acid. You can have crampy stomach. You can have problems with lower down in the digestive tract where each of the sphincters don't work too well. Some people get a constipation, or they get diarrhea, even fecal incontinence. They might get bloating because the peristalsis is dysregulated. So things are moving in the wrong direction, which can create bloating. It can, because of the effects on nerves, it's a nerve toxin. Anything that's run by a nerve, that's all your muscles, can start acting up. You can get twitches and flutters, hiccups, and other spasms from the nerves being toxic. With the nerve toxicity, you have the central nervous system that can get toxic, which includes really difficult mood changes. The brain can become very negative, very even depressed, loss of like the zest for life, like you're passionate about anything, you don't care about things anymore. I call that flat affect, where you just don't care. You're like a teenager. It's like complaining, whining, no interest in anything. This is inflammation, and it can get pretty bad. People can have panic attacks, irritability, mood changes, even sort of a bipolar presentation. So it can also affect, as you said, brain fog, your ability to like really know what's going on and to think clearly, to pull up words, to remember words, to spell, your cognition. All these things can be affected in the nerves. And so nerves also, just your general energy level are affected by nerves. So it can be muscle spasms, neuropathies, pain syndromes, mood. So all of those things are just nerve toxicity. They look like a lot of different things, but it's nerves that are poisoned, and it affects the muscles in a similar way. So you can have lots of different pain syndromes because oxalate breaks the acidity of it, seems to break the collagen fibers and make connective tissues unstable. Mm-hmm. And that was really the root, I think, of my foot problems. I had broken bones in college, had to leave Cornell for 4 years for foot surgery, was on all these crutches and painkillers and stuff. And it took 8 years to get off of the orthotics and painkillers. And I never was quite right, couldn't go barefoot. And I believe that was because the connective tissue that's supposed to hold my feet together was too weak. And once I got off the oxalates, the pain went away. Now I can run barefoot and my feet aren't weak. But it stayed that way for my entire life, for 30 years, so connective tissues is so interesting because it continues to affect similar tissues, but I didn't necessarily notice that weakness elsewhere, but it's obviously been happening because my spine has been degenerating. So the acidity that oxalates are causing and the loss of calcium causes the bones to have to keep sacrificing its minerals. So you keep dissolving your bones in order to correct the loss of calcium and to correct that acidity. And eventually you get osteopenia and osteoporosis. I truly believe, now this is controversial because medicine hasn't proclaimed this, but I truly believe that high oxalate plant foods like the peanuts, potatoes, and the stuff we've mentioned are the root cause of osteopenia. Mm-hmm. And it's really sad. That's another connective tissue that's degenerating. So connective tissue degeneration can mean pain, instability, easily broken or injured, difficulty recovering. You seem to have old things that never really completely clear up, like my feet. That's a sign. So you've got arthritis and all kinds of aches and pains and whining could be connective tissue problems, neurological problems, and then there's, of course, digestive problems. But then there's your whole hormonal system. Glands tend to collect oxalate. Your thyroid gland, your pituitary gland, your adrenal glands, your pancreas, these are all really critical orchestrators of everything that happens in life. And they usually get in a hypo mode where they're under functioning because of oxalate damage to the tissues. Sometimes you get hyper and some people go back and forth. So if you have thyroid function that's all over the charts, you can't stabilize it. It's either high or low. Oxalates might be part of that story. We've got inflammation turning on and off, and coping mechanisms working and not working, back and forth. And so that can create all kinds of metabolic havoc, and it may be weight problems, maybe problems with losing weight, maybe problems gaining weight, problems with temperature regulation. We see Raynaud's syndrome, where you have vascular disorders, where you get this reactive spasms. Again, it's another muscle spasm that causes Raynaud's syndrome, where the smooth muscle cells in the arteries will react to cold like an allergy, and you'll lose your circulation in your fingers or toes or something. But vascular decay is another thing, because the stuff is really rough on the endothelial tissues of the vascular system, and you can have capillaries that are weak, and you can cause eye damage. If you have vision problems, even cataracts. And then there's the dental decay, both the kind of decay you're used to, but loss of bone in the jaw, masseter muscle issues, sinus problems, chronic infections. Oxalate coming into the bloodstream wrecks the immune cells that are running around the bloodstream and causes them to become pro-inflammatory and less able to handle infections. So if you have chronic sinus and yeasts and UTIs and you name it coming back and back and over again, that's because your immune system isn't doing well, and oxalate can be a reason for that.
And kidney stones.
Oh, yeah. And then there's the textbook thing, the one and only thing that the medical people say oxalate causes, and that's kidney stones in the whole urinary tract. So it can be kidney stones for some people. For a lot of us, it's a slow building up of a diffuse collection of calcium oxalate in the kidneys. That's called nephrocalcinosis. Everybody dies with nephrocalcinosis without kidney stones. A subset of the population, 12-15% of us, are prone to the kidney stones. The rest of us, I can pee out oxalates like crazy and never get the kidney stones, and have. I have been peeing out oxalates heavily for 40 years, and now I don't anymore. I've been 9.5 years, and I rarely see the heavy crystalline look of my urine anymore. But some people get bladder problems. The crystals that are forming in the urine are very irritating to the mast cells and immune cells inside the bladder. And it's like having a rash. It can become painful, disrupt your sleep. You can wake up a lot at night, lose your sleep. Another way to not sleep at night is to not just have brain that won't settle down, because the oxalates cause the nerves to be on, but it can cause the immune cells to be on in the bladder. And that can cause pain as well, and loss of sleep. And that can be really debilitating. You can get bladder stones. You can have pelvic pain syndromes. You mentioned the vulvodynia. There's the genital pain can come along, and heaviness in the loins, in the pelvic area. That's inflammation down there. That is well known to clear up on a low oxalate diet and be part of this syndrome for some people, and not everyone. You're going to get your own little version of it. Maybe it's just bad eyes. Maybe it's bad teeth. Maybe it's heart issues. It's going to be different in everybody.
You mentioned you see them in the toilet through your urine. What do people look for? What does it look like to have the oxalates in the urine?
Yeah, it's imperfect science, because a lot of what we're peeing out is the ionic oxalic acid, and that's invisible. And when you've got high oxalates in the diet or in the bloodstream, it can be nanoparticles of calcium oxalate and other, maybe magnesium oxalate. And that is also fairly invisible. But when those crystals are clumping enough to refract light, they're bigger than the wave of lights, then it gives the urine this milky, slightly opaque look, and you can't really see through it well. When it looks opaque, whitish, slightly milky, that's lots of crystals usually. And it's not just crystals, because the kidneys, when they're dealing with so many crystals forming in the urine as the urine's forming and coming to the bladder, the kidneys can actually strip out cells that line these tubules, these passageways, as a way of flushing crystals. And so in that cloudiness can also be kidney cells being sacrificed for the cause.
Mhm. Very interesting. And the thyroid, I mean, more people than ever are suffering from hypothyroidism away from oxalates. And the spike protein I've discussed has really wreaked havoc on the body, on the liver, and kidneys, causing water retention, oxidative stress, inflammation, hypothyroidism, all this stuff. Then you add in the oxalates. What have you seen in the last 2 years with your clients where their symptoms may have gotten worse because of the combination of the burden of the oxalates and the spike protein?
It's very hard to tease this out in every case, but the oxalates came first because we grew up on peanuts and peanut butter and chocolate and whole wheat toast and potatoes everywhere, tater tots in school and chips and fries everywhere. So we tend to, generally, all of us tend to overeat oxalates as a modern way of eating, is too much oxalate for most people. So that's pre-existent. And depending on how much you've been eating, how leaky your gut is, because the more leaky your gut, the more you absorb. So it takes less and less oxalate in the diet to become toxic. So everyone's in a different state of sort of toxicity / coping with this too high oxalate. And often when you start getting sick, you start adding in the turmeric and the spinach and the juicing and then the low carb and the almonds, everything. And then you're allowed to have chocolate. So you're sick. You might as well medicate yourself. So it can really get worse when you're feeling bad. So this can be escalating. And then you get slammed with something like this COVID, whether it's the vaccine version of it or the natural version of the various forms of the virus. All of these things are turning up inflammation. Remember how I said the bladder pain is just an inflammation reaction. The crystals prompt inflammation. Getting rid of oxalate from tissues after you stop eating it requires inflammation. So you're in a heavily elevated inflammatory state when you're poisoned with most things, especially oxalate, because of the crystalline nature and this long tail of having to clean it out. And that's the job of the immune system. And then you add in some infection, something pretty tough, like this COVID stuff, and you have taken inflammation to the moon. And it happened to me. I mean, the best story is the one that I've lived through, and that I was ignoring a beef allergy pre-COVID and having beef a lot, pretty much every day, because it would make me fatigued when I'd eat it at least 60% of the time. Let's call it 60% of the time. And it make me crave carbs. So I knew something's not right here. I really should do something about this. And but I wasn't really taking the time for myself to really handle it. I'm busy helping other people. So I'm sort of ignoring the beef allergy out of convenience so I could just keep living my life. Big mistake when I got COVID, because during COVID, I had fever for 9 days. I made myself eat a small hamburger patty, didn't enjoy it that much, but felt like I should eat. And after COVID, I developed lichen sclerosis, a 2-centimeter nodule on my thyroid gland, and had top to toe facet joint arthritis 24/7 all the time. And I didn't figure it out until around early April. And so I got COVID in mid-October. This was a couple of years ago. And it took me months to realize what was going on. It was really after the MRI saw the nodule on the thyroid gland, I realized what is going on. And so I got off the beef, and 10 days later, the facet joint, within days, the arthritis pain went away, the itching went away. I have to rescan the thyroid gland. But this is an example of, if you let an inflammatory situation perk along, like I did with the beef allergy, in the context of clearing the oxalating, then you got COVID, it turns it into this evil generator of serious autoimmune conditions, which are, is mine gone or is it in remission? I'm sure if I ate 2 bites of beef, I would be itching and it'd be driving me crazy quickly. So the older you are, the more you abuse your immune system, and you get these more epigenetic kind of imprints on your system and more weakness in your reserves with how well your glands can manage everything and keep your inflammation down. It can get evil.
Well, I'm so happy you brought this up because 10 years ago, with the meat supply and the beef supply, with maybe less toxins or what they're eating, you may not have reacted to it. But it's the piling on of the excess radiation and the excess toxins in our food supply, and even our our organic foods being oversprayed with the GMOs. All of these things are one more burden. And then you can't handle that cup of blueberries or berries or the handful of almonds like you could have 20 years ago. And your liver's just saying, I can't do this anymore. You've put too much pressure on me.
I think it's really the immune system in general, and that we're doing so many things and have been for so long now, for 100 years. Too much chemical exposure, not enough attention to prenatal nutrition. And families who tend to have allergies, which both of my parents have allergies, all my siblings have allergies, this sort of type is very prone to developing all these food reactivities. And you have this background of being basically poisoned by modern life, not eating the right foods. Oxalates is another thing that's destroying how the immune system works. And if you've got these things impacting your immune system and you're prone to allergies, you're going to start reacting to lots of foods. And I see this in the oxalate crowd that I work with. A great many of us have a tremendously long list of intolerances. Our immune system is overzealous because what happens is if the immune system is up and working hard at something like COVID, and you're eating something like beef, it's going to train your immune system to start reacting to that beef. And oxalates are doing this too, because the innate immune system, the initial immune system when you're born with, this is cellular immunity, comes along and deals with things, and it starts training the adaptive immune system to react to this area where the crystals are. And that area is often the gut. And whatever tissue it is, you can start reacting to those tissues itself or reacting to food you're eating. So we see this with a high oxalate problem, that oversensitivity to things is huge. And of course, the foods have changed, and that may be another thing that's going on. It's so many factors, it's really hard to know. You know, in my case, we buy locally sourced half cows for the most part, and have been doing that for 24 years and been sourcing organic. But there is no such thing as organic anymore. My yard is covered in herbicides from my neighbors. I have an organic yard that's covered in herbicides.
Right.
Because it's in the air. It travels 10 miles. Right behind me is a business that sprays many, many times along the back fence and along this 1/4 mile of long upwind that comes down into my yard. And you can see it all over my garden. My persimmon leaves right there out the window are all tortured, puckered, buckled, and messed up from the herbicides in the air. So my yard is organic, not thanks to my neighbors. So you can't really live toxin free. I mean, it's the reality. So we have to be able to at least recognize the toxins we can control. And the ones we're eating are certainly, that's important. And this natural toxin, oxalic acid and oxalate crystals, to me is worse even than a lot of these synthetic chemicals and other things that we're paying more attention to.
Well, the other part is that when people are starting to clean up their diet, right, they're going to these healthy, toxic superfoods. So let's talk about what foods contain oxalates that people, and the other part is they're concentrating it in juicing, celery juicing or spinach, smoothies, whatever, what have you. Let's talk about the foods to look for.
Spinach is the poster child of a high oxalate food, and you can find it dehydrated in baby foods. People use it in smoothies and juicing. It's in salads. They put it on pizza. They'll sneak it in foods. They hide it in baby foods. Like spinach is everywhere. People do this with chard, which is more bitter and even worse. And beet greens. Those are the 3 greens: spinach, chard, and beet greens. But they're the ones in the mescaline mix and the salad mixes. They're the ones that make it look cute because of little red stems, and they're everywhere. And they are dark. So darkness is an attribute right now. And so dark leafy greens are the magical thing. And no one knows that they're not safe. even though they could have labels on them. And my Asian store locally used to have a label on spinach saying, if you have kidney stones, you probably shouldn't eat this. Mm-hmm. We need that again. So that's the poster child, is those dark leafy greens, but just 3 of them. All the other greens are low in oxalate. Then there's the almonds, cashews, peanuts. They're the worst of the nuts, but it's not great to use a lot of nuts. They're heavy in mold. They're heavy in oxalates. They're hard to digest. If you have digestive problems, they're not healthy. But people are using nut flours, nut butters to make supposedly healthy brownies, healthy cupcakes, and stuff they're giving to children. They're using nut butters. They're using almond milk, which is surprisingly toxic. You would think, 8 almonds in a little box of almond milk isn't any much. But when you dilute it in all that water and you make the almond milk out of the almonds, you've really isolated that oxalic acid and put it in this dilute liquid form that's very easy to absorb. With all that water, the water gets absorbed between the cells in the gut and brings along all that oxalic acid. So your absorption rate, how much gets into your bloodstream, is very high with something like almond milk. So even though it's not concentrated super, super high compared to the almond bread, it's just as bad because all that water is promoting it. And so juicing and smoothies is another way to liberate the oxalic acid especially, and make it more absorbable. More of it gets into your organs and veins and so on. So that's an issue. And then there's beans, burritos and black beans, white beans, Boston baked beans. They're very popular with people who are trying to lower their meat intake. And they're a problem. Peas aren't so bad. Chickpeas aren't so bad. And green peas aren't so bad. But most people are not putting those on burritos. Black-eyed peas are pretty low. And then in the grain department, it's the bran, the whole wheat, and the germ are high in oxalate, not the junky, starchy part that you all love, but the healthy parts. Right. And then if you can't eat the gluten, you're going off to buckwheat, like soba noodles and stuff like that. Really, really high in oxalate and problematic. Quinoa, teff, really high. And they're becoming the thing. Oh, quinoa is so great. It's protein. It's really high in oxalate and saponins and other anti-nutrients that harm your digestive tract. Then there's the chia seeds, chia bulbs, hemp, sesame seeds, the turmeric you talked about. And then in the fruits, there's like kiwi, blackberries, pomegranate, star fruit. People don't do star fruit, but people who do in Southeast Asia and Brazil can even die from a glass of star fruit juice. Mm-hmm. And then there's the sweet potatoes that I was eating so much, and the regular potatoes too.
Right, because you go to the restaurant and, I'm going to be healthy. I'm going to have the sweet potato fries instead of the regular fries. And by the way, they're vegan because they're just oil and potato. So all the vegans think that, it's okay to eat the French fries, but they won't touch anything with butter on it. So it's just so interesting. I mean, I've got some vegans as clients, and over the years, I've finally gotten them to be eating some meat because they don't feel good. Most vegans feel great for 6 months because they've eliminated some of the processed foods they were eating. It wasn't what they decided to eat. It was what they stopped eating that they started feeling good. But then there was, the inflammation and the pain from the oxalates from, they're starting
nutrition.
Exactly.
Your cells stop working correctly with that degree of malnutrition. And I think the first few months on veganism is a form of a fast.
Right.
And fasting, you always feel a little better when you're fasting.
Right.
For a while, if you can handle that low level of nutrition. Some of us are just not paying attention that the diet isn't working because we believe in it so heavily. I did it for 8 years after 8 years of vegetarianism, and it was devastating me, and I never put the connection together. Hello. Right. Hello.
What I try to get people off of is this mindset that they identify with either a keto diet or a carnivore diet or a vegan diet. That's not who you are. We are not our diets. But oxalates, I talked about this, or I touched on this a bit ago, about how when you get off of them, it's not real easy. You can't just quit milk and then have your skin clear up in a day or two. With the oxalates, how do you flush the oxalates safely out of the system, because there can be some side effects if you quit cold turkey.
Yeah, and it's different for everyone. You can sometimes quit cold turkey and have no noticeable side effects for a while. In fact, some people like my husband, his side effects of oxalate clearing was periodic hip pain. That was something as like an annoyance. It wasn't too disabling. Periodic back pain, nothing big, periodic interruption of sleep, sometimes mood changes, but it was nothing high and dramatic. So he did fine. And I think that's really common. But some people are so toxic with it and their body is so eager to get rid of it. If you do a sudden drop, it's a strong message to the body from a lot to nothing. It tells the body it's got a chance. So the blood levels drop quickly and the body's like, listens for 3 days, works busy, changes the cell, re-outfits the cells so the cells can get rid of the oxalate. And sometimes all the cells join the party too fast and it's too much coming out from the tissues. So the more you have in your tissues, the more it's moving, mobilizing, and getting back into the bloodstream, the more dangerous it is. And that's really toxic. You can land in the emergency room with what feels like a stroke. So electrolytes. If you're getting a lot of palpitations and a lot of heart symptoms, you probably got unstable calcium and potassium and sodium. You need to deal with that. It's likely not going to kill you, but you need to be careful because if someone's really frail and sick and very toxic with oxalates, then they need to be really managed and carefully supervised and get good support because you just never know. It is a deadly poison. So I think assessing if you have a long history of leaky gut and a long history of using potatoes or whatever, any of these foods, you need to use great caution and go kind of gradually and learn for the signs of this clearing of the oxalates and get a sense of if you've got illnesses related to this oxalate clearing and you can manage it. But a lot of people do okay. And some people have come to me going 0 oxalate in their 3rd year. Now they're having all of a sudden disabling symptoms where they can't work, they're wiped out, they're in a lot of pain, brain isn't working, and they were fine for 3 years. So it could show up later. I find that the 2.5 to 3rd year period of time, we get into some deeper stuff where more stuff is coming from maybe the bone marrow and the bones and the tendons. It takes a long time to fix all this in the body. And it's the immune system getting out the jackhammers and digging the stuff out of your tissues. That's not pretty. It's like surgery without anesthetic. It can be difficult.
I kind of liken it to the experience I had with heavy metals. When I was tested for heavy metals, I was high. I was off the charts. Then I went through a chelation process, and halfway through that chelation process, got tested again. My levels were even higher because my body was getting rid of them, and there was more in the bloodstream to be tested or in the urine, and they were coming out. And so that's what is going on. The body is so smart with how to process these toxins to get rid of them safely. And it's just really interesting with the oxalates, how they're treated differently than any other type of allergy. So what is the best way to change your diet so it's low or free of oxalates? What are your top recommendations for someone to implement?
Well, see if you do some of these worst offenders like almonds, spinach, and some rhubarb is another one I didn't mention, dark chocolate, and see if you can start with one of them one at a time and find a replacement for them. So there's a beginner's guide available on my website. We can list of high and low oxalate foods and see if you can substitute them. And you really do want to get enough protein and animal fats. So if you're not ready, if you're a vegetarian or vegan, just do what you can do emotionally and be willing to keep growing and consider that down the road, you may find that your health is asking you to make a choice that your brain has been taught you think is the right thing, but it may be undermining your real goal, and that's to have a life that's worth living. So you want to keep learning, but this gradual approach is easier because you don't have to completely, like in one day, pull off the Band-Aid. You don't have to know it all. It gets confusing about what to eat and what not to eat. It's hard to learn that. You have to keep going back to the list, going back to the list, and going back to the list. So give yourself some patience in the process. And then, if you've got some symptoms, there's things we can do. The calcium is a binder that allows you to remove oxalates from the body better, but it can also encourage it. Some people feel much better and get pain relief with calcium citrate. And that's typically the case. Some people, the calcium promotes the clearing to the point where they get sick on it quickly, because it really, and that may be one reason why people don't initially get these symptoms, because they don't have enough calcium going around to help the body do it. There's a lot of mysteries around why different people react differently. But yeah, if you could spend your energy really learning and observing and maybe even watching your symptoms. And I have these handouts available. If you come to my group class, you'll get a lot of handouts that explain what are the signs of dumping. Dumping is the term for that high mobilization when a lot is going on and you really see the symptoms. But generally, there's this deaccumulation or clearing of oxalate from your tissues. It's just part of daily life for the body. It's going to do it anyway. And sometimes if you don't have symptoms, that's the best thing. You want to slowly clear, because dose makes the poison. So you don't want to see that spike in high oxalate, but you will at times. And one way you'll know if oxalates are spiking is you might see the cloudy urine. You might get frequent urination at night, where you're getting up at night and it feels urgent, or you might have to run to the bathroom because it's urgent, even though there's not a lot of urine available there, or you get leaky. Those things are all potentially signs of oxalate clearing, as is gritty stools, as that's the crystals forming in the stools, hemorrhoids and burning. If you get tartar on the teeth, you might want to check them in the morning and see. If you're getting tartar on the teeth, that's a sign that your oxalate levels in your bloodstream's been up. If you get extra grit in the eyes, I used to get my eyelids with like glue shut overnight. The eyelashes would be so gooped up with some kind of excretion that's oxalate related, probably oxalate itself. You can see sometimes you get white stuff drying on your face coming from overnight. So the tears, the tartar, the urine, the feces, the skin, if you're getting skin reactions, boils, rashes, itching, patches, peeling skin, red dots, these can all be oxalate clearing. And that'll help you, because if you're feeling bad, if your mood's off, your energy's down, you're feeling overwhelmed today, you're feeling like life is hard, and you've got one of those signs, it's all probably this inflammation related to oxalate clearing.
And with COVID and over the last 2 years, the amount of people that have experienced skin rashes is through the roof. I've had people from, every direction saying, "What's this rash on me?" And it's one more thing that is triggering that immune response, and then oxalates could be part of that puzzle. And I also talk about how sulfur, the sulfur vegetables used to be healthy for us, and now our detox pathways can get blocked and backed up from the sulfur vegetables that are healthy. And then the sulfur and the oxalates play together in the sandbox and make things even worse. And then add in any other autoimmune issue or allergy like you have to beef. And it's a firestorm. I know we've just got a couple minutes left. You have been on a mostly carnivore diet. Would that still be correct? Or have you incorporated some low oxalate foods, vegetables and fruits?
I use some coconut water for carbohydrates and coconut products here and there. I probably drink about 14 ounces of coconut water at least 5 days a week. So I get some carbs. I also eat a papaya once or twice a week to get some carbs. That really helps me sleep and have energy. One of the problems with oxalate is you can have this blocking enzymes, and I don't know how much of it's directly anymore or how much epigenetic changes, but you have trouble keeping your blood sugar up. You have trouble keeping your muscle glycogen levels up and your liver glycogen levels up. And when liver glycogen drops and the liver is short on fuel, that's really inflammation prone. And that actually increases oxalate in the body, by the way. So some of us just do much better on some carbohydrates. I don't think we need to demonize carbs to the point where you think you need to be super keto all the time. And you can still be super keto and still eat carbs. Like they're not incompatible. You just have to just not be in the modern way of eating is ridiculously high in carbohydrates. So there's a strong message out there that we need to cut back on the carbs, which is legitimate. But being all or nothing, that sort of toxic, strict idea around signing up for a label and trying to do that. No, what works for you may often be you need some carbs. I like to have people use carbs in dinner time. It really promotes better sleep, lowers inflammation, can even help you lose weight because it lowers the inflammation. So you drop a bunch of inflammatory weight overnight by eating carbs. So I do really, it's very modest amount of carbs. And I'm eating a lot of fish because of the beef allergy, which is wonderful. My body just loves tuna and sardines, and I still love them. I can eat them all the time. It's so bizarre. I know I'm like a giant cat. I can eat canned fish, and I love it. And it keeps my muscles beautiful. The omega-3s are great. The calcium is great. I use pork. Some people can't eat pork. It works great for me. So it's really important that people don't say, well, I'll do what Sally does. No, we need to listen together, how to listen to your body and what's really going to work for you. But a lot of protein and a lot of fat coming from animal foods is really a nice way to heal, because there aren't so many things interfering with your digestion. The flavonoids and the polyphenols actually interfere with digestion. The fiber in plants can be rough on the digestive tract. It's actually easier on your body to not have too many plant compounds and too much fiber. So if you have to go really low and go towards carnivore, it's okay. It's actually what humans used to do quite a bit. We didn't have refrigerated trucks and we didn't have planes and ships bringing in food 24/7 year round. We really did have to survive on animal foods. And so that's okay. Some people are just waking up now to the fact that it's not calcium in butter causing heart attacks like I was told in college. I was literally told it's all fat. It's animal fat. It's saturated fat causing all the evils of our health problems. I was literally told that at Cornell. And it took me a while to get over the fear of salt and animal fat and butter.
I think that goes for all of us because we were so indoctrinated. And I think I eat the same as you do. I love my papayas. I incorporate low oxalate vegetables. Sometimes I'll have a carnivore meal. Sometimes I'll have a salad with it. But I listen to my body. And I also know the meats that really feel good in my system, like bison and lamb and wild fish. Those are my go-tos. And it's just, you really listen to your body. Don't have to be just so stringent and identify with one way of eating. Well, before we go, Sally, tell people where they can find your book and your classes.
Yes, so come to my website, sallyknorton.com, and you can find information about signing up for classes and get the beginner's guide. And there's a low oxalate cookbook there. You can get toxic superfoods anywhere books are sold. Definitely be aggressive with your local retailers so that they're carrying it. I would love it if you'd read this book. People are enjoying it, and it's really wonderful. People are leaving reviews on Amazon and Goodreads and elsewhere, and that's helping get the message out, helping more people discover that you don't need spinach smoothies and turmeric juice to get healthy.
No. And I just wanted to touch on, some supplements that can help clear the damage done and the oxalates a little quicker. This is part of the reason that I've come up with the Ascent Diet Cleanse with the supplements to help support the soaking up of the toxins, getting them out, supporting the thyroid with the acceleridine, supporting your ketogenic lifestyle with the accelerated keto. And it just supports you as you are coming off of the oxalates, dealing with the brain fog, dealing with maybe the kidney stones or the arthritis. So that is just one key you can add in, and then following the guidance of Sally. So Sally, thank you so much for joining us today. It was amazing. Oxalates, people need to know about oxalates and what they can do to the body. And thank you everyone else for joining us today. And if I can help you through your protocol or a need for a protocol, you can contact me directly through my website, sarahbantahealth.com. Happy to do that for you. Leave a comment below. Have you been struggling with oxalates? Does this sound like you? Are you incorporating some of these healthy toxic foods that Sally was talking about in a concentrated way? Are you drinking drinking that celery juice. Celery might be fine, but celery juice, that was not the way our ancestors ate celery. Join my free group coaching on Telegram. I go through this as well. I incorporate the oxalate teaching as well. And I will teach you on a daily basis with tips and tools to enhance your health. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram under Accelerated Health Products and across over 100 channels under Accelerated Health TV and Radio Show. And join me every Monday and Tuesdays for my live shows. You can also use coupon WELCOME10 for 10% off site-wide. Thanks again for joining us and have a great week.